Day of the Dead, the 1985 George Romero-directed zombie movie, is something that I've been thinking about making a video about for years because I have very ambivalent feelings about it. I've never really been able to come to terms with exactly how I feel about this film, and I wanted to sort of air out what I think to try to work out what exactly I think is right and wrong with the movie. It was released in 1985 and was the third and for a very long time final movie in the trilogy of zombie movies that George A. Romero started in 1968 with Night of the Living Dead, where he created the modern conception of a zombie as a corpse that walks and eats human flesh and must be killed with a bullet to the head. Romero was really a legend in the horror community, although in reality I think that Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead kind of don't live up to the reputation that they've amassed over the years. And in general, I feel that they are incredibly important as influences, but ultimately just the thing that set people along the path towards the modern zombie movie, not really great in and of themselves. However, I still find the first two movies to be more or less entertaining. The third one, on the other hand, I remember instantly disliking when I first saw it years ago. I went in there with sky-high expectations and didn't really come out of it with the kind of love and affection that I had and had expected to give to the film. But let me back up a little bit and give you some background about the movie, what it's about, and the good things about it. The movie is set somewhere farther along in the zombie apocalypse than the first two films were. Many years, perhaps, have gone by since this all started. And the zombies have more or less taken over the entire planet. There's a huge disparity of the number of zombies to that of humans. There's something like thousands of zombies to every one human, maybe. And the film centers around a group of scientists and military men that are hanging around a secret underground base somewhere in southern Florida as they try to research the zombies and figure out a way to destroy them. The star of the movie is Sarah, played by Laurie Cardille, and we first see her in an absolutely gorgeous opening shot in the sun-drenched, very tropical-looking zombie movie that's very different from the Pennsylvania-based ones that we saw in Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, and it looks beautiful. There's something amazing about these shots in the bright open air of Florida as a gator crawls around with a bunch of zombies walking outside of a bank. And this is also our first shot of the absolutely stunningly great zombie makeup in this movie. It is incredible and maybe the best zombie makeup ever in any movie. It was done, of course, by Tom Savini, and it looks leagues better than it ever did in Dawn of the Dead, which is a much more popular and famous movie, where there was sort of like a comical powder blue skin aspect to the zombies, and that was basically it. But the zombies here look older and more decayed and disgusting. And later on, we see some of the greatest zombie effects ever in any movie, some of the greatest special effects in any horror movie, in the laboratory and the underground base, as we see this zombie's brain functioning and moving around without a face or a skull around it.
It would be benign even if it had its eyesight and its other senses. Its primitive instincts have been erased. Deliberate.
And the various scenes where people get their guts ripped out or their faces torn off are incredible and very memorable. After this opening sequence of Sarah trying to do something, I guess find some people that are still alive out there in the world somehow, they head back to the underground bunker where we spend the majority of the film, and the movie has an incredibly dark, closed-in, claustrophobic feel to it as we wander around this very nondescript underground bunker. That the bunker is very distinct in just how indistinct it is. There's sort of a government-regulated, processed kind of feel to the the dankness of this tomb that they've encased themselves in, which is sort of like a weird theme. They are fighting these zombies that are living out in the world, while all of the living human beings have encased themselves in this sepulchral, crypt-like tomb place deep underground. The twisting hallways have a sort of paranoiac feel because you don't know if there's any zombies that are going to jump out from any place around there. The great majority of the movie shows the breakdown of relations between the scientists and the military men. We know immediately that they are living in a very fragile psychological place where their morale is at rock bottom. They are miserable, tired, angry. Most of them have probably suffered from some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. Everyone in this place is absolutely miserable, angry, habitually accustomed to violence, and ready to lash out at anyone and everyone around them.
Shoot that woman or you are dead. You think I'm fucking around, Steve? You're wrong.
All right.
No!
The soldiers are initially portrayed as violent, sexist, misogynistic assholes who are just completely without any human sentiment or feeling.
Still, whip it out. That'll bring them on.
Fucking A, biggest piece of meat in the cave.
Means you're a caveman, asshole. You're a fucking throwback. You've been spending too much time underground, huh? It's okay, Steel. Throwbacks all got big dicks.
However, the movie does a great job in not really focusing as much on the good-evil aspect. In the real world, very rarely is there a black and white good and evil kind of difference between people. Everyone sort of operates on a shade of gray, and they do a great job in this movie showing everyone kind of has an opinion. In fact, one of the characters at one point says one of the most important things in the movie.
We're all pulling in different directions.
Well, that's the trouble with the world, Sarah darling. People got different ideas concerning what they want out of life.
And it's kind of an important life lesson to learn. Everyone wants what they want out of life, and they diverge and people fight. And the soldiers, as terrible as they appear, actually kind of have a point, because they have been fighting and dying and miserable and angry and giving their blood and their life and their sweat for months or maybe years fighting this zombie plague to absolutely no effect. There's no point. There's really no communication between the scientists and the military about what's actually going on.
I'm not even sure just what the hell it is you're doing in there. Just what the hell it is my men are risking their asses for.
We can kind of sense their anger as they slowly risk their lives miserably living in this tomb, interacting with zombies all day under the threat of death. And in some ways, as terrible as they often are, they're right to question what's happening. No one's really good or bad here. The scientists, as we later find out, are really not engaged in any kind of practical work in defeating the zombies. Most of what they're doing is theoretical and doesn't really have any applicable effect against the zombies. I think everyone would be willing to risk their lives and their sanity if there was some sort of goal, but there really isn't any goal, not any that's in sight here. The leader of the scientists, played by Richard Liberty, is brilliant. He is incredible. This is one of the all-time great mad scientist characters ever portrayed in cinema. He's nicknamed Dr. Frankenstein, and he is absolutely gone insane. He thinks that he could somehow tame the zombies, to make the zombies behave in some way, and he's trying to teach them, to make them learn things and be friends, and he really doesn't see very much of a difference between humanity and the zombies, and is trying to find some sort of relationship between these two groups.
I'll show them that these creatures can be domesticated even without the surgery. Knowing what they are, we can begin to approach them properly, condition them, control them. You've got to do this, sir. It's our only hope.
But everything he's doing is completely loony, and the scientists, including Sarah, become increasingly terrified at the fact that if the soldiers find out that this is what they've been wasting their time doing for months or years with so many people suffering and dying, that the soldiers may go crazy and kill everyone. And Sarah is terrified of this guy as well, because he's just a lunatic. But he's also a great character. Now, the military men are led by Joe Pilato, and this actor is incredible. He turns in a bravura performance here, fairly low-level officer who is gone totally totally nuts. He is absolutely enraged. He represents militarism and authoritarianism. He is absolutely furious and threatening to shoot dead any of the scientists that won't obey him or the other soldiers. And he is an absolute symphony of insanity. I love him. He's my spirit animal. I adore this guy. I want everything to do with this guy. He's great. The camera loves him whenever he's on screen. These moments of the movie are incredible.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
So if I have all of these good things to say about the movie, and I really do, like the makeup, some of the acting, the world building, the set, why do I not like the movie very much? Well, I think it's basically a couple of reasons, one of which has to do with the practical effects of what's going on in the zombie world. This is our third trip into Zombieland with George Romero, and I really am beginning to have my suspension of disbelief destroyed by this movie, because we've spent two films, Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, which both ended with the zombies being sort of rendered impotent and harmless and being slaughtered in huge numbers by men with guns. And the second one, they didn't even really have guns. They just killed them with, like, sledgehammers. The kind of point at the end of the other movies was that the zombies eventually were sort of shown not to be as much of a threat at the end and were massacred in huge numbers. And yet in both occasions, at the beginning of Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, we show that incongruously, the zombies have somehow managed to take their revolution even farther and are destroying people. The plague has spread somehow.
You want to put some kind of explanation down here before you leave? He's one as good as any United to find. We've been punished by the Creator. He visited a curse on us. Maybe he figured we was getting too big for our britches, trying to figure his shit out.
This would make some sense, I guess, if the humans had created the plague as part of some sort of biological warfare scheme like in The Stand or in The Walking Dead, but we didn't. It's just like, what, God is angry at us and so he kills us? Really? That's the only explanation that you're going to offer? And we should just obey some sort of omnipotent being? That was really kind of weird that they went in this direction. It kind of undercut the ending of the previous two movies for me. And the second reason, the much more important one, is the oddity surrounding the philosophy of this movie. You see, this takes place towards the end, when everything is almost completely extinguished. And Sarah, our main character, is someone who, I think quite rightly, believes that we should continue fighting to the bitter end and try to destroy the zombie plague and repopulate the world. It sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? But the movie is relentlessly battering us with this extremely nihilistic, almost suicidal message that is just so despicable and weird.
No. What does it matter, Sarah darling? All this filing and record keeping. We ever gonna give a shit? We even gonna get a chance to see it all?
And yet they're portraying it as the morally correct path to follow. It's so weird. It's sort of summed up in a way by the speech one of the characters gives.
You ain't never gonna figure it out. Just like they never figured out why the stars are where they're at. It ain't mankind's job to figure that stuff out. So what you're doing is a waste of time, Sarah.
Just what kind of political philosophy is this even? Like neo-Luddite, suicidal, pacifistic mysticism or something? Like what the heck is happening here? This is ridiculous. And by the way, this is what George Romero's official beliefs about this are.
When he was described in the script, he was big, 6'5", huge man like George Romero. And I thought, oh, George wrote this for himself, which was very interesting because it had a nice perspective as to why all of this was happening, and which he penned.
He wrote this part supposedly for himself. This is what he really believes. This is the good thing that we're supposed to be doing. That we should just all kill ourselves and destroy civilization and live like cave people because the zombies have taken over. Yeah, great. Yeah, that sounds like a real good move.
Is the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
This is actually one of two characters that are sort of like a third, kind of like the odd men out of the group. They're not part of the scientist-military dynamic here. They are the sort of industrial people, the workers, and they're played by two men with somewhat hilarious accents. One is Caribbean and one is Irish, and they all sort of, it kind of sounds weird and kind of jarring, and I can't quite stop paying attention to it when I'm trying to listen to them speak. I think they probably should have just been Americans. It just sort of sounds weird otherwise in these roles. Like what are these guys doing here even? But anyway, they have this attitude that we should just give up, that we should just not care, that we should not fight, that we should not bother with anything, that we should just not care that the zombies are trying to take over the damn world, that we should just, whatever, let's find a tropical island and hang around there and just tag team the blonde chick for the rest of our lives, you know? I mean, that sounds wonderful.
You have the protection of this facility, you eat our food, you drink our water, and you don't lift a finger to help. Neither one of you.
We don't believe in what you're doing here, Sarah.
No, that just, as I said, sounds so grim and nihilistic just to give up the fight. I'm really more of a diehard. I would want to fight to the bitter end, even in hopeless circumstances. It's hard to sympathize with characters who are trying to explain to you that they don't care and they just don't want to engage with any of this. They just want to wander away and forget about all of this violence. I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous. Why should I care about characters that aren't even willing to engage with the story? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not going to care about a bunch of people that are complete nihilists who just don't want to exhaust any energy to do anything. You know, if we almost came to the story after it was over, after they've given up and realized that they can't do anything. And they stay in this sort of weird paralysis throughout the entire movie, which may be a theme, sort of like in Dawn of the Dead, where their entire plan is to just hang around in the mall and seal themselves off from the outside world and do nothing else. Maybe they're trying to say that the military and government are doing this in the same way, and that they really need to go out and begin engaging with the world. But whereas the Dawn of the Dead had a much more positivist message where they were trying to say we should help people, we should work with the world, we shouldn't withdraw from it, Day of the Dead, again, completely incongruous to the message of the previous films.
Oh, fuck it.
Oh, fuck it. Yes, that's your answer. That's your answer to everything. Tattoo it on your forehead. Your revolution is over, Mr. Lebowski. Condolences. The bomb's lost.
It says that we should just not care. We should just go to a desert island somewhere and hang out and hope that zombies don't learn how to swim. I mean, that's just so ugly and so... I really just condemn it completely. I can't enjoy it. I need to talk about the rather odd relationship I have with the main character of this movie, Sarah. In some ways, on the positive side, she is one of the most progressive characters I've ever seen in a horror movie, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone call her out for being so forward-thinking and progressive. She's a woman, she dresses entirely sensibly throughout the entire film. She is, in contrast to the way women are normally portrayed in horror movies, not a screaming hysteric. All of the men are screaming hysterics and completely emotional and wild. She is actually the only one who's really able to keep herself calm, relaxed, and dignified. She's also not a robotic character who just has no emotions whatsoever. She is able to physically defend herself against zombies, and she is a world-class scientist, and she talks back to the racist, misogynistic men that are all around her.
Look here, woman. I'm short on manpower. I won't have you going around doping up any of my men without orders from me. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Fuck you, sir.
I mean, you know, she even has a boyfriend that's clearly suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder who, because of what some people might call negative attributes of masculinity, refuses to address his issues and work through his pain, and instead goes crazy because he just keeps piling stress upon stress upon stress at him, despite Sarah being the voice of reason trying to tell him not to do that.
Let me help.
No, I don't need help. I don't need help.
Come on, give me this.
I'm all right. I'm just tired.
You're not all right. You're collapsing from stress.
You're
Now let me
collapsing
help.
from stress. We're all collapsing. This whole fucking unit is collapsing, everybody except you. I know you're strong, all right. So what? Stronger than me. Stronger than everyone. So what? So fucking what?
So, in many ways, she's the most progressive character that's ever appeared in any horror film ever. Or the progressive female character, I mean.
It was all about the strong woman, and sort of adopting a certain inner core of don't mess with me. And that's what was so brilliant, I think, about George's work at the time, is that he was feeling that movement happening, knowing that movement, and brought this character to the screen.
So, yeah, I don't know why that hasn't been I don't remember that ever being really mentioned by many people, but that should be, shouldn't it? And yet, I don't really like her very much because she's kind of boring. There's not really a lot of personality there. There's a lot of boxes checked about her behavior, and they all sort of check out along this particular political path, but she's really not all that interesting. She's actually kind of dull. Sometimes Sarah's dialogue kind of sounds like robotic dialogue from a 1950s sci-fi movie.
I thought we were going to stop work on the neurophysical and concentrate on something more practical. But you're just proving theories that were advanced months ago, and you're not even proving them correctly. You're making a lot of assumptions here.
Like, she's just coming off like a bit of an automaton here, but later on, when her boyfriend looks like he could die and turn into a zombie, she does show a bunch of emotion, but it's kind of balanced oddly. Some moments you just want to shake some life into her, and even the actress playing her said that she wished that the character could be a bit more emotional. A lot of the characters in a lot of these movies were dull. The first two female protagonists, all of the protagonists in Dawn of the Dead were pretty dull, to be honest. You know, she just doesn't have that spark or that energy that Dr. Frankenstein or the crazy nutjob military guy does. He doesn't really have, I mean, even the Irish guy and the Caribbean guy, he doesn't have, I assume he's Jamaican, but I don't know where in the Caribbean he's from, that's why I'm saying that. And, you know, I don't know why I just don't care for her, but she just seems kind of boring. Like, I even forgot her name before I watched the movie again. It was just so, you know, her character can be, I said she wasn't robotic, but she can be a little bit emotionless here and there, like a little bit neutral, you know, where she doesn't seem to be, she seems to be affecting a kind of pose of neutrality or trying to tranquilize herself from the intense situation she's in. But, you know, I just don't like her all that much, and especially because later on in the movie, she begins to sympathize with the attitude of the two working class guys and just wants to get the heck out of there. I didn't really even get into Bud the Zombie, this fantastic portrayal of the walking dead creature that Dr. Frankenstein is trying to teach to be more human. It actually seems like it's learning and understanding things, but ultimately, what does that mean? That couldn't possibly happen, right? They're never actually going to reach some point where you can teach the zombies to live normally. It just goes nowhere. It's just a circle. I mean, multiple movies he's done now have had this weirdness in it, and it's not like we're going to be living next to the zombies and having tea parties with them someday, right? I mean, of course we know that's never going to happen. So it doesn't seem very interesting. It just seems like a pointless diversion up a blind alley. Although, as I said, it's portrayed beautifully here. The actor portraying Bud is great and has an incredibly evocative face with this sort of ponderous, almost hangdog lower jawline that just seems, that's really intriguing. You can really feel like there's something going on in his head, like he conveys that he's thinking about something just with his facial expressions here as a zombie, and he should get all the praise in the world for that. The music to Day of the Dead is really a downgrade from Dawn of the Dead, which had the amazing music by the Italian techno rock group Goblin, which has, you know, such an iconic set of soundtracks in the late 70s and early 80s. They were great. They added this creepy, otherworldly, but very, very modern ambiance to the films, and they're worth listening to even outside of the movies. But here, there's virtually no soundtrack at all, except a very, very generic one that could have been heard in almost any movie, including this ridiculous calypso theme. I don't want to play too much of it because I think I don't want to get copy struck, but it just... It really doesn't convey this is a scary zombie movie. I think Romero deliberately wanted to make it different from the thing that came before it, but yeah, he didn't make it different, he made it bad. It was good, and then he turned it to the opposite. He turned it to crap. And if anything, it just tells you to give up. Forget about it. Who cares? You know, just why am I even paying attention to this movie? Just go on a beach somewhere and hang out forever. So as the movie progresses, the relationship between the military guys begins to break down even more. They become more violent, more wild, more insane. A bunch of their military guys get killed when they try to get some of the zombies for more scientific research. And they just begin to completely lose their minds, and Sarah and the others need to get out of there immediately. However, it seems like they really should have done this ages ago, like the beginning of the movie, they already should have been running away. But instead remain in this weird stasis. So I'm kind of screaming at the screen, get out of there, get out, you need to leave, but they just don't do it, and they hang around for way, way too long. So towards the end of the movie, the military guys finally snap, kill Dr. Frankenstein and another one of the scientists, and set the Irish guy and Sarah to die from the zombies, and try to kidnap the Caribbean helicopter pilot guy to take them away from here, and go somewhere and do something that's not really specified. Unfortunately, Sarah's boyfriend, who's gone completely crazy, eventually allows the zombies into the facility, and suddenly there's this huge zombie plague, and it's one of the great zombie plague moments in any film ever.
Holy shit!
You know, there's still a significant amount of humor in the movie with the zombies. You know, this is a very somber movie, but the zombies are kind of goofy. There's like a wedding dress zombie, and I think there's like a nun zombie at one point, a football player zombie. They all, you know, they look kind of, I think there's a cheerleader zombie. They look sort of silly as they run down there and eat everyone. You know, there's a scene that just goes on forever at the end. I mean, I enjoy seeing people ripped apart, but it happens to like 5 characters in succession. We get to see them all torn apart and eaten, and it takes like 15 minutes of this, just seeing that pretty much the same scene over and over again. Sarah and the others eventually manage to get away and run away to the Caribbean island or wherever the heck they go, and presumably hang around there for the rest of eternity while the rest of the world is destroyed. And I think the main reason I don't like the movie is because of that message, that weird, like, nihilistic, who cares, let's not do anything, let's just drop out kind of message that they throw in there. They just say, fuck it. They just give up. They just don't care and run away. And I just can't support that. An incredibly grim, miserable kind of ending. And yet, weirdly enough, in the last segments, they have this cheery, like, calypso music playing with them on the tropical island, trying to make us feel good that they just gave up and are not even pretending to try to help anyone and destroy the zombie plague. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, a big reason I wanted to make this is because Day of the Dead really did not get a whole lot of love when it first came out. It was zipped into theaters and then pulled right back out because audiences really, really disliked it. And yet, over the past 30 years, it's achieved a cult classic status and has been considered a horror masterpiece in the horror community. You know, it has this sort of reputation of greatness. It was released in the middle of the 1980s at the heart of the Reagan era, and I think that a kind of dismal, upsetting, dark movie was perfect for the counterculture, which roughly ran from the late 1960s to the late 1970s. And in the 1980s, people had a completely different vision of the world, a much happier, brighter, more forward-thinking version of things, and this is a pure hippie film. This is a long hair film from moment one, and I think that's why people really didn't rally behind it, especially during that era, and why later on, where a more pessimistic worldview began to take hold again, people began to to like it. I just don't think that this movie deserves to have that level of respect. I can understand why it didn't do well at the time, but I think even outside of that era, it still has too much of a dismal, unpleasant, unhappy vision of the world. It's not quite that it's too dark or countercultural or subversive exactly. It's that it's almost suicidal, you know? It's not just against the main culture. It's against doing anything, you know? I mean, destroying all civilization. They just say they just want to wander away and live like in the Stone Age forever on some tropical island. It's such a bizarre and, to me, very depressing and miserable kind of message that this movie has. And despite all of the great things in it, stylistically speaking, the message of the movie destroyed this for me. And I can't get behind it. I can't get interested in it. And having said that, I think I have to come to the terms with the fact that I don't hate it because of anything bad in it. I hate it because everything in it is done beautifully and done well for someone else, for someone that's not me, that's willing to enjoy that kind of political attitude that I tend to reject. Well, anyway, that's all I have to say. I had to get that off my chest about this weird ambivalence I have. Again, great things about this movie. The most progressive female character in any horror movie ever, maybe. You know, she dresses in incredibly sensible clothing that you would expect her to wear, not running around half-clothed half the time, like most slasher movie heroines. Incredible makeup, wonderful setting, some outstanding performances, but I just think it has this, like, apathetic miserableness about it all that makes me not sympathize or care with the characters. A bunch of the characters I find either boring or silly. Sarah's scientist friend with the Van Dyke. I don't even remember this guy's name. He's so boring. So I can kind of get into it and kind of enjoy it, but it's very situational where I enjoy the film and where I just completely lose any sympathy whatsoever I have for the people in it. As I said, I was ambivalent about it when I first saw it 15, 20 years ago, and I'm still ambivalent about it now. I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I just know that it's not really going to make it into the horror pantheon of films that I will watch again and again and always love. So please tell me what you think of this movie, if you agree with my points, if you think I'm ridiculous and you think it's one of the best horror movies ever made, why I'm wrong, why you think I should watch it again, because I've seen it many times and I haven't really changed my opinion on it over the decades. But if you think I should give it another go, please tell me below. And what are some of your horror movies that you feel sort of ambivalent about? You don't quite know how you feel about them. I'm going to link a review that I've done to another horror movie and a few other videos that I've done here, so please check them out. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos I make about movies, video games, and TV shows. And yeah, my name is Michael. Thank you very much and have a good night.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
Hail the Dead.